Alright, what I have done is just listen to 3 Lou Kauffman talks, and he says in one of his talks, quote, "It's almost mystical on primordial time," and we have to go back farther in his talks to 2014 and then 2018. So we see in this slide he's talking about primordial time right here. In this sense, I is identical in concept to a primordial time. Now, what is mystical about this? Quote, if you take the recursion 1 minus 1, 1 minus 1, and the fixed point in that sequence is not anywhere in that sequence, it's the square root of minus 1. So in other words, that's what's mystical, is how the square root of minus 1 arises out of this discrete primordial time. Now, we quote again. So I'm back here, and I have this way of thinking of the imaginary number I. I've made I temporarily sensitive in that way, but I want to think of the following principle, which is a well-known principle in physics, not always expressed this way. And the principle is that if the usual principle is that very often it's fruitful to take a time variable and replace by I the times the time variable. If you're thinking in pure mathematical terms, you might wonder, well, why the heck would that be useful? But if you're thinking in these quasi-physical terms, then it does make a certain kind of sense, because if you multiply by I, then you're multiplying this already temporarily sensitive entity, which is coming from the simplest discrete process that you can imagine. So there's a certain interpretation there that isn't usually present. When you do what's called a Wick Rotation, which is to formally multiply by I, the imaginary number, formally multiplying by I takes you from one context to another, like it takes you between the Euclidian context, x squared plus y squared plus c squared into plus time squared, into the Minkowski context, where you want, quote, minus t squared, for example. Quote, it's almost mystical the way multiplying by the imaginary number and replacing t by I and replacing it shifts you from one context to another in elementary physics. So I'm adding a way of questioning that to the brew, in that it seems that I is already time sensitive, and that has to do with why, when it's aligned with t, something happens. So that's a quote from another talk that he gives. And now we go to a third talk where he says, the Russell paradox appears as a fixed point in negation. Negation is not supposed to have a fixed point in ordinary logic, because negation of true is false, and negation of false is true. And there's only two values in ordinary logic. So the Russell set could live in a larger logical domain, but that's another way of creating fixed points. In other words, the Russell paradox exists in this quantum logic that Eddie Oceans also discussed in his collaboration with Lou Kauffman. And so that's from his talk, The Square Root of -1 is a Clock. So we had that's the third talk, The Square Root of -1 is a Clock, from 2014. And then we have this Southern Illinois University seminar as a second talk. And then the third talk is this Primordial Time slide from 2018 for the Alternative Philosophy Natural Association out of Cambridge. And so Luke Hoffman was working with Pierre Noyes on discrete physics out of Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, along with Eddie Oceans. And then he goes into the quaternion Dirac belt and the Dirac dance as the self-referential motion, based on this same principle of primordial time. And so that's the secret of the mystical. He calls it a synchronization. So you have this discrete synchronization of the future and the past overlapping, and he also explains this creates what is observed to be Brownian motion. And so the source of supposed random Brownian motion is actually this discrete primordial time of the future and the past being synchronized as asymmetric or non-commutative non-locality before the real number space-time continuum is created. And that's also the secret of music theory as the infinite factorization of infinite dimensions from 2, 3, infinity as the imaginary number primordial time that Alain Kahn also explains. So I'm just going to leave it at that, and just want to document that Luke Kauffman is directly tying his primordial time to it being almost mystical. And Bertrand Russell did say that the irrational real numbers are a, quote, convenient fiction. So now we know why they are a convenient fiction, but it is math professor Luigi Borzacchini who, emphasizing this same logical paradox that has not been solved, then states, this created a quote, deep pre-established disharmony as the, quote, guiding evolutive principle of science. So this explains the increased gravitational entropy behind in the classical physics that's created the ecological crisis on Earth today. And if you understand this non-commutative secret, it's also the secret, as Luke Kauffman explains, of Richard Feynman's physics that Pierre Noyes also explained due to the secret of the particle going backwards in time from the square root of -1. And so this is also the secret of the quantum potential as anti-gravity. And if you realize that it's synchronized due to this discrete asymmetric time shift that Luke Kauffman explains in these talks that I will link, then you realize this is the same emphasis that Alain Kahn was making, and Professor Basil J. Hiley has been referencing both Alain Kahn and Luke Kauffman as the mathematical basis for his noncommutative quantum potential physics as the new quantum gravity, the secret of quantum gravity. And so it was already discovered in ancient times, and that's why it's almost mystical, because it's very simple. It's the simplest physics as the simplest iteration, and at the same time it does not allow the real numbers as a fixed point to exist logically. And so when we try to create those fixed points, then we create disharmony. And that's the problem that we've now rediscovered through quantum physics and with the transition frequencies that Heisenberg discovered, and Luke Kauffman is then able to derive the Heisenberg version of the Schrodinger wave equation based on the Heisenberg uncertainty principle of the non-commutativity of position and momentum. So he goes into all of that, and I'm just pointing out that the almost mystical quote is a corroboration of why the non-Western meditation actually works, just as Eddie Oceans taught and realized for quantum psychology, working with Luke Kauffman. Thank you very much.